I love what you were saying about the responding and reacting, because for me that's almost two different things. Because response almost takes a second, right? You have to think about how am I going to respond, whereas reacting, it's almost more of an emotional. Sometimes you have to choose what is important to you, family, above money. Hello and welcome to Woman Power. I'm your host Lorna Grayling, and in studio today we have one phenomenal woman, Magda Odendaal. She is an entrepreneur, a business owner. She is a wife, a mother, a grandmother. She has her own talk show on Gospel FM right here in Atlanta. She has first runner-up right at Mrs. United Nations. She is the founder of the SA-USA Commerce of Business, co-founder, right? You're going to have to add where I'm coming short, because I was reading your CV and I mean, I don't know where you find time to breathe.
You know what, Lorna, I think all of that in the end doesn't really matter. Is where we are today.
Yeah.
And why we are here where we are today that matters.
Absolutely.
For me, that's what's most important. If we look back on our journey, we all have a massive CV.
Yeah.
I think, you know.
I think you're saying that to make us feel a little bit better about our lives.
But I really believe that, you know, the power of success is mostly the people you have in your life. I recently had a birthday, and in my reflection I said, you know, my wealth is not in material things, but in the people that I have around me and in my life over the years. Some has left, some stayed, but that's the true wealth. We all have each other, and I think that's what's important.
Absolutely. Magda, you're so comfortable sitting with phenomenal people in a room. I mean, the women and the people that you work with, you know, we can only aspire to meet these kind of people. What drives you to do what you're doing every single day?
My main objective is purpose. It's always to run within purpose. To believe that the doors that opens we need to walk through, and those that close we need to pass by, and to understand that the journey we're on, if you walk in purpose, you know the why am I doing this?
Yeah.
If that's the driving component, to me that's when the doors open, because you never chase doors, you never chase people, you chase purpose.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the ability to understand the difference. Otherwise, we will all chase life like headless chickens.
And we do sometimes. Sometimes we just feel like you say, like absolute headless chickens. What would you say? I mean, because I love that, what you were saying, you know, the doors that are closed, move along. The doors that are open, push through. How do we know the difference?
I think what is important is to understand your purpose. Yeah. Because in the end, although we all have a universal joint purpose as human beings in the things that God does expect from us, which is ultimately to achieve the ultimate talents and objectives that He has and His vision for our lives, and align that with the vision that we have for our lives. and to understand that disappointment and hurt is part of the journey. But we don't have to stay there.
Powerful.
We don't have to stay there. It's part of the journey, and it leads you sometimes to rethink the why. The what, the where, the who, that comes easy when you know the why. And sometimes I'm concerned that, it's almost a differentiation between the sacred and the corporate, how do you draw the line? And it's to understand the why. For me, that is always the
key.
The point of departure, in everything we do on a daily basis.
Yeah. So what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
My journey took me for more than 20 years to literally every nation on earth. There was very few countries that I haven't touched base with. I've trained over 18,000 women in the corporate world on trying to, convey the message of the why within the corporate world, but also our personal life and our spiritual life. And how do you combine those things? And for me, how to do that is to look at the experiential learnings. We can read everything on the book and we can find everything on Google. But I believe the depth of our understanding of life comes from our journey. The experiential learnings that we have gone through, the things we experienced, whether it was joy, whether it was sadness, loss, gain, all of that brings us to this place of we understand our why, and then obviously align that with God's will. And I think, it sounds easy, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not at all. I hear how you're explaining this so beautifully. I mean, you've got such a way with words. I can see why you're so successful in the corporate world. Yeah, it sounds easy, but it's not. That is the.
And it's about understanding your purpose. To know your purpose is one thing. To understand it, because with understanding comes execution, comes application.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, we were discussing this just a few minutes ago, actually, in a conversation, and we were talking about if you're, like you were saying, the doing of it, right? Doing. And also something that we were coming back to a few times in our conversation, just a while ago, is that you cannot do the same things and expect a different result.
Never.
Right?
Never.
Yeah.
And part of the understanding is there are universal principles that works for everything and everybody, and every religion. And then there are transcendent principles, and to understand transcendent principles is to understand that there are certain principles in their deity as being a transcendent principle is the one that's going to take you across the board, that extra mile. And those refer so much to biblical principles, but it's integrity. It's to acknowledge your mistakes, it's to know your weaknesses, know your strength, know your self-value, know the things that you can and cannot do, the willingness to acknowledge all of that by application in a day-to-day life, by application in a transaction, by an application in a relationship. All of that matters, but it's the transcendent values that I believe in the end that pulls you across the border.
I love that. It's just it's like you say, it's in the application, right? It's in the doing. So many people want success, and I mean, you were saying this in the beginning. What is success? Right? Define success. I mean, you're a successful woman. That's why we've invited you onto the show, because of the countless accolades that you've accomplished over all the years. But for you, what would you say is success in your life?
I think the biggest part of my success was my failures.
Wow.
That was the biggest part of my success, because I had to look my failures in the eye. I had to acknowledge and identify what was the skills that I lacked, which ordered the failure.
Wow.
Because, I love the word responsibility.
Like
we think about responsibility as the things we have to do. I look at it very different. I look at responsibility as What is my ability to respond to the things that matter?
Wow.
And most people
Just say that again, because that is so powerful. I love that.
We see responsibility as the things that we have to do.
Yeah.
We have to pay our bills.
Yeah.
We have to love our naughty children. We have to sometimes love our extremely difficult husbands. And we have to love the people that harm us. And that takes skill. So most people are so focused on response.
Wow.
They forget about ability. And I think part of the journey is to acknowledge that and sharpen the skills on your response. Sharpen the saw on your ability. How do I react when things go wrong? How do I react when opportunity comes? We had discussions this morning about, in the corporate world, about greed and how that has overtaken the corporate markets. And how do you deal with that in a day-to-day life? It's about the skill, the ability to respond appropriately to anything and everything that happens to us, whether it's a business transaction, whether it's a relationship, all of that matters.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you were saying about the responding and reacting, because for me that's almost two different things. Like you were saying now, respond. How do we respond?
Yes.
And because response almost takes a second, right? You have to think about how am I going to respond, whereas reacting, it's almost more of an emotional, like you almost can't help it.
And then you're touching it. You're touching the core. You're touching the core, which is emotions. Most people are driven by emotions. And it's not wrong. We have to have emotions. We're human beings. We love. We sometimes feel hate, although we don't tolerate that. But emotions is driving us. But it takes a skill to differentiate when an emotion is positive or negative in terms of the outcome you're looking for. And to learn to manage that. It's like driving a car. Now, coming from South Africa, we didn't grow up with automatic cars. Here it's a given. So there's a gear change that has to happen. Sometimes you're in first, second. Sometimes you've got to go into reverse or just park a little bit. I always like the comparison because that explains how emotions should be managed.
Wow, powerful.
And it's part of the skill.
Yeah.
It's
something that you can learn and develop. Yeah, because responding, like you say, it takes skill. You can learn how to respond. And if you make a mistake, again, I love what you were saying previously, is that your mistakes was actually your biggest success, because you could learn from them and evolve through them.
And not deny them, not build a bridge over them and leave the dirty water underneath.
Pretend like they're not there.
Yes,
right?
they're there.
Yeah.
It did happen.
Wow.
You and I cannot change that because there's literally nothing we can do about yesterday. So much we can do about tomorrow by the choices. And I think in the end, all of this comes together in choices.
Yeah.
The choices we make on a minute-to-minute basis, on a day-to-day basis.
That is powerful. That is very true. I think back over my life, choices that I've made, and what I would give to be able to go through it again and have made a different choice. But like you can't.
Okay.
So we've got to take what we've got and learn from it. And now next time I can choose differently and try and go for it.
Attach a value to that.
Yeah, that's very
Attach a value to your failures. When you failed in something, it does not implicate you as a failure. Yeah. That's general knowledge. We all know that. But when you're in a whirlpool of happenings and decisions, sometimes we tend to be emotionally so overwhelmed that by application we just lose it.
What would you say has been your biggest failure or success in that matter?
I think my biggest failure was to think that I could do things on my own. That was probably one of the things. Many of the choices I've made in my life, which happened to be mistakes or failures, was because I tried to do it on my own. It's when I have learned that, and the main driver behind doing things alone is because we fear.
Yeah.
We fear what people would do. We fear because people fail us daily. And one failure leads to another, and we think that everybody's going to fail us. Is to regain that confidence that my fears are legitimate, but they should not rule me.
Powerful.
My biggest victories came when I reached out to professionals, to people who know more than what I do. And they're always there, because we never arrive. I'm almost 60. I don't think I've arrived. I think there's still so much that I can and have to learn, and so much that I have to unlearn and relearn. I just don't want the process to stop.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is to keep going, right? Even if somebody does fail you or disappoint you, is to try again. Don't stop trying.
Don't stop trying. And that adds up with self-value.
Yeah.
You know, when we get broken down because we look at our failures as us, you know, that it accumulates. And the accumulation of failure in a negative perspective, that it will break you down. You won't have energy. You won't be creative. And in business, that's very, very important. You've got to remain creative, especially where we are right now with global economies, all these economic indicators telling us what is going on and what might possibly go on. Our mind is in a constant warfare on survival.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's important.
For sure. How do you keep your mind set on what you still want to accomplish? First question. And what do you still want to accomplish?
That is a very, very interesting question. The first part of your question is how.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, and I do believe in Christian principles and values, and I do on a daily basis look at what are my transcendent values, what are the borders and the boundaries that I have in my values that I'm not willing to compromise. Secondly, I believe that as much as God has His hand on us, over us, in what we do, we are responsible for the choices we make. He gave us a free choice. And love is one of the things that starts with self-love that has no selfish intentions, but a love enough to be obedient, to be transparent before God as to who I am. And so that is how I start my day, knowing that it's just not me alone. I am not alone.
Yeah, that is powerful.
You know, my husband was a pilot for many years as a captain in the cockpit. They deal with the unknown the moment they departed.
Goodness. And
every morning of our lives, we depart into the unknown because none of us know exactly what is coming to us. If we do not have our values set and clear boundaries, this boundary, I will not pass this boundary. It's a set boundary.
That is powerful. I like that. It's almost something that you have to decide in advance. Like,
yes,
these are my boundaries, especially in the business world, because
yes,
I think it can be very consuming, especially if you start reaching a certain level of success, right? Like you were saying, I mean, greed and success can totally consume you if you have not decided in advance how far you are willing to go and
yes,
where your boundaries will
yes.
be. And
the next part of your question is, what is it that I want to achieve? I still want to write a few books.
Wow.
I still want to travel more. I want to really enjoy my grandchildren. They're in the transition period of their lives, coming into the USA and waiting for their turn. I'd love to spend more time with my grandchildren. I might want to start 1 or 2 more businesses.
That is incredible. That's why I love speaking to successful women, because the one thing that people always say is, when you want something done, give it to a busy person, because they will get it done. And when reading through your CV, I don't know, like I said at the beginning, I don't know where you find time to breathe. And yet, if anything needs to get done, I know I can ask you, because you're going to get it done. How do you juggle all these things at the same time?
You know, I have a saying that everything in my life is like a glass ball. You know, if it's going to fall, it's going to break, and I have to make sure that my highest priorities, the glass balls, they don't fall. So it's not as much as what you do necessarily, but how you set the pace on relationships, because that's very, very important. Sometimes you have to walk away from money because of a relationship. Not many people can do that.
Yeah.
I have done that a few times. I had to walk away because the relationship was more important than the money that could have been made. And in the corporate world, that is not very likely to happen, but it's part of transcendent values.
I love that, because I mean, we often read in the magazines, especially when it comes to very successful and very rich people, that often their personal lives and their family lives, sadly, as the tabloids throw it out there, you know, it's just non-existent, and it's
Yes.
a big mess, actually. Let's just call it for what it is. And I think that's what you were saying now. It's, you know, sometimes you have to choose what is important to you, family, above money. And,
Yes, the sacred and the secular. What is sacred and what is secular?
Goodness.
And to be able to define those boundaries. And make time for a good movie with your husband, or a lunch with your mom, or your friends, or your family. And yeah, time management is very, very important. We all know it's part of emotional intelligence, that you manage your time very well. And that is this, you know, time is the one gift God gave equally to everybody in this whole wide world.
Yeah, that's so true. We all have the same amount of time. It's just what we do with it. It varies. It's interesting to me that you brought that together now with time management and emotional intelligence. I've never thought of the two together. That is a very powerful statement. Yeah.
Yes.
What would you say if someone is mismanaging their time as such, and they kind of find themselves in an emotional state where they can't seem to get it back? How do you take that step back and become more emotionally intelligent to manage your time? Is there something practical that you can share?
It's a choice.
Okay.
It's a decision. You'll never feel like doing that. So it's never a feeling. It's always a choice. And again, part of emotional intelligence is to make intelligent choices based on not just emotions, but facts, real life, not generic scenarios that we sometimes scale for us to just find a way around it, but to walk through it and say, I have to do this. Because if you don't I always tell my kids, if you don't manage your time well, you're stealing from yourself. You are disarming yourself with one of the most powerful tools you have at hand. And we get tired, we get exhausted. And sometimes time is just not on our side, because we don't always control, especially in business, you don't always control the things that's coming your way, but you do control the priorities of that.
Yeah.
And sometimes you've got 20 things that's equally, needs to be prioritized. However, that's where people comes in. Good relationships is a great resource to have. To make a call to say, I need your help.
Yeah. To be able to ask for help as
To be
well,
able
right?
to ask for help.
Not to be
And a
too
trusting
proud.
source.
Yeah.
And that comes through relationships, and it's just...
What I hear you saying as well is to have that powerful team around you, team of people that you can trust, and
critical.
that one can't do it alone. How do you choose your team? How do you decide which people to pull around you and draw near?
I think you do a due diligence when it comes to a business transaction. And again, you could divide that you could divide in different compartments, compartmentalize it. There are people God placed in your life, and until you realize that's a godly appointment, you won't see the value. There are people who've disappointed you that you have to walk away from, which you don't, because of emotional ties. That's the hard part of relationships, is to understand that sometimes you've got to walk away.
Yeah.
You don't want to. You
don't
really
want
love that person. But you know, in that specific business scenario or relationship scenario, that person is going to cause you a lot of harm and loss, and you've got to walk away. And it costs a price.
Yeah.
Whether the price is financially, emotionally, it's critically important that as well as you choose your partners in everything you do, there are people you have to walk away from. And to be smart enough to do it wisely, but to walk away.
Yeah.
And you can love them, but you can't trust them. You know.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I
No.
mean, none of this is easy.
No, it's not, right?
People
But
see you where you are today, but once they begin to learn about your journey, it wasn't easy for me to travel all over the world.
Yeah.
For
And leave
22
your family
years.
behind.
My family, my dog, my cat, my Sunday school class, whatever it is that is very valuable, you sometimes have to lay that on the altar.
Yeah. Magda, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, and we are looking forward to seeing all the spectacular things that you are still going to achieve.
Thank you so much, Lorna. Thank you for having me today, and it was an honor to spend time with you.
Thank you. Well, that's all from me, Lorna Grayling. I have been your host for Women Power. I hope that you have gotten so much out of this show, as much as I have. And join us again next week, same